Inside the narrow hallway of Willow Creek Veterinary Shelter, the soft hum of a ceiling fan stirred the stale summer air. In the last kennel, Buck, a sturdy golden retriever with mournful brown eyes, lay curled protectively around a frail gray kitten named Binx. The kitten's tiny body shivered under Buck's heavy paw, yet somehow found peace pressed against his golden fur. Outside the kennel stood Seraphine Calvert, the clinic's senior vet, arms folded tightly across her chest. Beside her, Callista Winslow, a young vet tech with freckles and a gentle voice, leaned forward, watching Buck's every breath. The older woman's voice cut through the quiet. "Callista, he hasn't moved for hours. If we don't separate them soon, we can't treat Binx properly." Callista swallowed hard, her eyes misty. "He won't let go, Dr. Calvert. He growls if I even try to slide my hand under Binx. It's like he's decided he's the only thing keeping him alive." Behind them, Thorne Whitlock and Magnus Ellery, both volunteers who often worked late shifts, exchanged uneasy glances. No one in this old rescue had ever seen Buck behave this way. Loyal, yes, but this was something deeper. Seraphine sighed, frustration giving way to worry as she studied the latest blood panel pinned to her clipboard. There's something wrong here. Binx shouldn't be crashing like this. And Buck's refusing food. He hasn't touched his bowl since we brought Binx in. She lowered her voice, her eyes flicking to Thorne. "If we lose both of them because we didn't act fast enough." Inside the cage, Binx let out a tiny, raspy cry. Buck immediately lifted his massive head and nudged the kitten's ear with his nose, then settled his chin on Binx's back as if to promise he wouldn't let the cold steel world touch him again. Callista pressed her palm to the bars, whispering, "Hang in there, Buck. Just let us help him, please." Before Seraphine could answer, the back door swung open with a gust of hot air. Caspian Harlow, the overnight vet, stepped inside, scanning the room before locking eyes with Seraphine. "I've run new tests. You need to see this. Now." But Buck didn't lift his head. He held Binx tighter, the air so heavy with unspoken fear that everyone knew. Tonight, a secret would break this bond, or strengthen it forever. Caspian Harlow laid the fresh test results on Seraphine Calvert's cluttered desk, his voice low but urgent. "There's something here, Seraphine. Binx isn't fighting just an infection. His blood work shows signs of severe anemia, but it's not adding up. It's like something's draining him faster than we can treat." Seraphine's eyes flicked to the kennel where Buck lay, unmoved, wrapped around the fragile kitten, as though his heartbeat alone could keep the little life inside him. Meanwhile, Callista Winslow stood at the kennel door, gently humming a soft lullaby her grandmother once sang to calm frightened strays. Buck's ears twitched at her voice, but he didn't lift his head. Behind her, Thorne Whitlock stepped closer, a fresh bowl of warm broth in hand. He whispered, "Try again. If he eats, maybe he'll get his strength back. For Binx." But as Callista pushed the bowl through the bars, Buck ignored it completely, only nudging Binx closer to his chest. At the far end of the hallway, Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler whispered in hushed tones. Magnus, a calm mountain of a man, was pacing back and forth. "If Buck keeps starving himself, we'll lose him first. We should sedate him, get Binx out and feed Buck properly." Orion shook his head, frowning. "You know Buck. If we force him, we break him. He trusts us because we trust him back. If we cross that line, we lose both body and spirit." Seraphine rubbed her temples as she listened, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She knew the volunteers were right. Buck's loyalty was saving Binx moment by moment, but destroying Buck inch by inch. She turned to Caspian, voice barely more than a sigh. "What are we missing? He's acting like Binx is more than just a stray. Like, there's something tying them together. Something we don't see." Back at the kennel, Callista crouched down, her eyes locked on Buck's soft brown gaze. She spoke softly, tears catching at the corners of her eyes. "Buck, please. You've given your whole life to healing others. Let us help you this time. Let us help Binx too." For a fleeting second, Buck blinked slowly, as if he understood every word. but his paw tightened protectively around Binx's tiny body. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a knock on the shelter's main door. Isolde Merrick, another senior vet tech, poked her head in, her cheeks flushed. "Seraphine, there's a woman here," says her name's Eloan Graves. She claims she knows exactly where this kitten came from, and why Buck won't let him go. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes snapping to the door, as Buck let out a soft, rumbling growl no one could mistake for anything but a warning. No one would take Binx without facing him first. Eloan Graves stood just inside the shelter's entryway, her fingers twisting the strap of her worn leather purse. Her eyes, a pale storm gray, swept over the rows of kennels until they found Buck curled tightly around Binx. She seemed older than her age, worn down by something she hadn't spoken aloud yet. Seraphine Calvert stepped forward first, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "Eloan, you said you know this kitten. Talk to me, before we lose him and Buck both." Eloan's lips trembled as she forced her eyes away from the pair inside the cage. "His real name isn't Binx," she whispered hoarsely. "It's Ash. I was supposed to take him to a safe home 3 weeks ago, but things went wrong. He was born sick and his mother died during labor. Buck was there. He found Ash under a shed on my property. He wouldn't leave him, not for a single second." A heavy silence filled the hallway. Callista Winslow covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling freely now. Thorne Whitlock looked at Seraphine, his voice low. "So Buck thinks Ash is his responsibility. He didn't just find him tonight. He's been his guardian from the start." Eloan nodded, her shoulders shaking as the memories cracked her voice. "I was desperate. I thought I could handle him alone, but when his breathing worsened, I panicked. I left him at the shelter door, hoping someone stronger than me could save him." Magnus Ellery cursed under his breath, punching his fist softly into his open palm. "So Buck's been searching ever since. He must have caught Ash's scent when someone brought him in. That's why he forced his way into that cage and won't let go. He's been fighting for him longer than we knew." Caspian Harlow sifted through the new blood tests again, eyes narrowing as puzzle pieces shifted in his mind. "This changes treatment. If Ash Binx has a congenital lung defect, we can tailor the oxygen and antibiotics. But Buck's presence is what's been keeping him calm enough to fight." Seraphine turned to Eloan, her tone softening though her eyes remained sharp. "You should have told us from the start. We could have saved precious time." Eloan lowered her head, shame burning her cheeks. "I know. I was afraid you'd blame me. I couldn't bear losing him twice." Callista stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Eloan's arm. "We'll fix this. But Buck needs help too. If he won't eat, he'll collapse before Ash gets better." Just then, a soft rumble came from Buck's throat, as if he sensed every word spoken about him. His tail thumped weakly against the kennel floor, and he nuzzled Ash closer, a living promise that he'd stand guard a little longer. Outside the glass door, the sun dipped low, and Seraphine knew they were running out of both daylight and time. With one look at Caspian and Thorne, she whispered, "Prep the oxygen. Tonight we save them both, or we lose them together." The small treatment room behind the kennels pulsed with tense energy. Caspian Harlow moved quickly, setting up the portable oxygen tank while Callista Winslow carefully folded fresh blankets into a warm nest on the metal exam table. Seraphine Calvert watched the clock on the wall, each tick reminding her that Buck and Ash were balanced on the edge of something no medicine alone could fix. Thorne Whitlock gently slid open the kennel door, his low voice coaxing. "Easy, Buck. We're gonna help him. You've done enough alone. Let us take it from here." Buck's eyes flicked up, weary but fiercely guarded. His body shifted, instinct screaming to keep Ash pressed against him. It took Callista's soft touch and a quiet promise in his ear. "We'll bring him right back to you, Buck, I swear," before he loosened his grip. Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler hovered by the door, ready to step in if Buck resisted. But instead, the loyal retriever let out a long, exhausted sigh as Caspian lifted Ash into careful hands. The kitten's tiny lungs rattled with each breath, and for a moment it seemed the warmth of Buck's body had been the only thing keeping the fragile heartbeat steady. Seraphine placed a gentle hand on Buck's neck. "Good boy. Stay strong for him a little longer." As Ash lay under the clear plastic dome of the oxygen tent, Eloan Graves stood silently in the corner, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. She whispered to Callista, "When I found him, he was so cold I thought he was gone. Buck lay over him for hours. It's like he breathed life back into him." Callista nodded, never taking her eyes off Ash's tiny ribcage, rising and falling just a bit easier now. "Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he won't stop." Seraphine studied the new X-ray pinned up under the harsh light. Shadows along Ash's lungs told a story older than this rescue. A birth defect made worse by neglect and fear. She murmured to Caspian, "If we can drain the fluid, boost him with the right antibiotics and keep him calm, he might make it. But we have to keep Buck close. It's the only way he stays calm enough to breathe." Back at the kennel, Thorn had spread a soft blanket for Buck, but the retriever ignored it, eyes locked on the treatment room door. He lifted his nose and let out a soft whine that silenced everyone. Caspian looked through the glass at Seraphine. "If we lose Ash now, we don't just lose him. We lose Buck too." Seraphine nodded grimly. "Then we won't lose either. Not tonight." And as Buck's tail thumped once against the cold floor, a fragile hope flickered that maybe, just maybe, this fight wasn't over yet. Hours slipped by as the night wrapped Willow Creek Veterinary Shelter in a heavy silence. Inside the treatment room, Ash's breathing steadied under the soft hiss of oxygen. Seraphine Calvert checked the monitors every few minutes, refusing to rest until the numbers proved that hope hadn't been a mistake. Caspian Harlow scribbled notes on a chart, his brow furrowed. Neither spoke about the exhaustion creeping into their bones. They couldn't afford it. In the main hallway, Buck lay on his side, too weak now to stand but too stubborn to sleep. His eyes never wavered from the glass door separating him from Ash. Callista Winslow knelt beside him, stroking the golden fur between his ears. She whispered stories about all the other animals he'd once protected, as if reminding him he was still needed here, by everyone, not just one tiny kitten. Magnus Ellery returned from the storage closet carrying an extra 4 drip and fresh blankets. Orion Kessler met him halfway, voice low. "You think Buck's giving up?" Magnus shook his head, a rare flicker of emotion in his steady gaze. "Not Buck. He's just waiting for Ash to wake up. If that kitten opens his eyes again, Buck will fight. He always does." The two men stood guard by Buck's side like sentinels, unwilling to let him slip away quietly. Near dawn, the front door rattled with a soft knock. Thorn Whitlock opened it to find Lucian Brandt, an old friend of Seraphine's and a trusted wildlife officer, standing there with a folder tucked under his arm. Lucian's eyes swept the room, noting the drawn faces and the sleeping bodies in chairs. He handed the folder to Seraphine without a word. Inside were documents, reports about a string of illegal backyard breeders operating nearby. Ash's mother had come from that misery, and Lucian's files proved it. Seraphine's hands trembled as she flipped through the photos. Puppies and kittens stacked in wire cages, mothers starved and sick. She looked at Lucian, fury and heartbreak twisting her words. "So Ash was born doomed from the start." Lucian nodded, jaw clenched. "But he's here now, and if he survives, we shut them all down." Buck did more than save a kitten. He exposed a crime ring without even knowing it. Back in the treatment room, Ash stirred under the dome of the oxygen tent. His tiny paw twitched, a fragile sign that somewhere inside he was clawing his way back. Buck, sensing it, lifted his head despite the tremor in his muscles and let out a soft, hopeful bark. Callista looked up sharply, eyes wide, and whispered to Seraphine, "He knows. Ash is fighting back." And in that single moment, everyone dared to believe that dawn might break with 2 lives saved instead of lost. First light spilled through the shelter's dusty windows, painting soft gold across the sterile tiles. Inside the treatment room, Ash's fragile body rose and fell in gentle rhythm, no longer the desperate gasps of the night before. Seraphine Calvert hovered by his side, her hands steadying the oxygen mask while her mind raced through the day's next steps. Outside the glass, Buck's eyes locked onto Ash, a flicker of life sparking behind his exhaustion. Callista Winslow opened a fresh vial of antibiotics, her hands trembling with both hope and fear. She glanced at Seraphine. If he makes it through the next 12 hours, his lungs will recover. Seraphine's eyes softened for the first time in days. And Buck? Callista knelt beside the old retriever, stroking his sunken ribs. I'll get him to eat, even if I have to spoon-feed him every hour. Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler carried in more blankets and fresh water. They had worked through the night without complaint, their clothes smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. Orion glanced at the door, lowering his voice to Magnus. Lucian said he's bringing the state inspectors today. If that breeder ring Lucian tracked down is behind this, today it ends. Magnus nodded, eyes fixed on Buck. But first we keep these two breathing, one battle at a time. In the far corner, Eloan Graves sat curled in a battered office chair, knees drawn to her chest. Her mind replayed every mistake, every moment she should have asked for help but didn't. Thorne Whitlock knelt beside her, a rare gentleness in his voice. You gave Ash a chance. Buck did the rest. And now, you're gonna help us make sure no other animal lives like he did. Eloan managed a nod, though guilt still clung to her every breath. Back in the hallway, Lucian Brandt reappeared, clipboard in hand and a pair of uniformed officers behind him. He caught Seraphine's eye through the treatment window. Paperwork's done. We raid the property in 2 hours. No more cages. No more hidden deaths. For the first time in days, Seraphine allowed herself to smile, weary but fierce. Good. Ash's fight isn't just for him anymore. It's for every lost one out there. A soft rustle turned every head. Ash shifted under the oxygen tent, eyes fluttering halfway open, pale green slivers catching the morning light. A tiny squeak escaped his throat. Buck, as if pulled by an invisible string, forced himself upright, staggering toward the treatment room door. Callista gasped, tears rushing back to her eyes. Look at him, Seraphine. Buck's not giving up. And as the shelter filled with a hush of stunned hope, everyone realized this fight was far from over. But for the first time, they weren't fighting alone. The soft murmur of staff and the distant hum of the ventilation system blended into a fragile calm. Ash's eyelids flickered as he fought the fog of pain and weakness. Seraphine Calvert leaned closer, whispering as if her words alone could anchor him to this world. Stay with us, little warrior. Buck's right here. He's waiting for you. Outside the glass, Buck pressed his muzzle against the door, a faint whimper vibrating in his throat. Callista Winslow slipped into the treatment room, cradling a bowl of warm broth. She set it gently by Buck's side. Come on, big boy, she coaxed, her voice cracking. Ash is waking up. He needs you strong too. Buck's nose twitched at the scent, but his gaze stayed locked on the kitten who had become his heartbeat. With a trembling paw, he nudged the bowl closer, and for the first time in days, he lapped at the liquid's small victory, huge promise. In the reception area, Lucian Brandt spoke in quick, clipped sentences to the uniformed officers. Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler stood by, tension radiating from them like static. Once we hit that property, Lucian said firmly, we clear every cage, every shed, every hidden room. No more hidden litters. No more animals dying in the dark. Magnus nodded. And when they ask who brought them down, we tell them it was a dog named Buck who wouldn't give up. Back inside, Thorne Whitlock gently lifted Ash from the oxygen tent, cradling him in a nest of blankets. Ash let out a thin mewl, tiny but stronger than any sound he'd made in days. Buck, hearing his voice, let out a deep, ragged bark that startled everyone. A declaration that his pup was coming back from the edge. Callista laughed through her tears. You hear that, Buck? He's talking to you. He knows you're here. Eloan Graves lingered at the doorframe, her guilt slowly transforming into quiet determination. She spoke to Seraphine in a trembling whisper. I'll testify. I'll tell everything I know about the breeders. No more secrets. I owe that to Ash and Buck. Seraphine placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And when this is over, you can visit Ash as often as you want. You started his story. Now you help us finish it right. As dawn spilled into mid-morning, the shelter buzzed with a sense of unstoppable purpose. Ash lay curled in Thorn's arms, tiny chest rising strong and steady. Buck, now with broth warming his belly, lifted himself to stand, muscles shaky but resolve unbroken. And as Lucian and his team stepped out the door toward the raid, everyone inside Willow Creek knew one truth. A single dog's love had changed everything, and today, that love was tearing down walls far beyond these 4 shelter walls. Under a pale morning sun, Lucian Brandt and his team of officers moved like shadows through the abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Rusty cages lined the walls, and the stale smell of neglect clung to every beam. Lucian's voice echoed through the empty halls. Clear every room. Check for hidden doors. No more secrets. Behind him, Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler broke padlocks and pried open crates, releasing eyes that had known only fear until today. Back at Willow Creek Shelter, Seraphine Calvert paced the hallway with her phone pressed to her ear, her other hand tapping nervously against her clipboard. She barked orders between updates from Lucian. Yes, bring them straight here once they're stable. We have room. We'll make room. Thorn Whitlock leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed, keeping an eye on Buck, who lay resting but alert, tail tapping slowly whenever Ash squeaked in his sleep. Inside the treatment room, Callista Winslow gently cleaned Ash's eyes with a warm cloth. The tiny kitten flinched but didn't whimper this time. His breaths were slow, strong, a rhythm that seemed to steady Buck too. Every so often, Buck's nose pressed to the glass door, fogging it with longing. Callista whispered, "Soon, old boy. He'll be back in your paws soon. Just a little longer." Eloan Graves, having shed the last of her fear, helped sort fresh blankets and food bowls, her mind focused for the first time in weeks. She turned to Seraphine, voice unwavering. "When they come back, they won't find an empty cage or an ignored cry ever again. Not here. Not while Buck's story reminds us what loyalty looks like." Seraphine allowed herself a tired smile, nodding at the woman whose mistakes had nearly cost Ash's life, but whose courage was helping to save so many more. Meanwhile, at the farmhouse, Lucian paused outside a rotting back shed. He gave Orion a silent signal, and together they forced the door open. Inside, trembling eyes blinked at sudden light. Puppies, kittens, mothers too weak to stand. Lucian's voice cracked as he called it in. "They're alive. Bring transport. And tell Seraphine. We'll need every spare blanket she's got." Back at Willow Creek, as the news spread that the last hidden cages had been broken open, Buck lifted himself onto unsteady legs and barked. Loud, clear, a sound that carried hope down every corridor. Ash, startled but safe in Callista's arms, peeked out with half-lidded eyes and let out a sleepy chirp in return. In that moment, everyone knew. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the start of a new life, written in fur, breath, and a bond no cage would ever break again. Afternoon light streamed through Willow Creek Shelter's windows, warming the once sterile hallway with a gentle glow. Inside the largest recovery kennel, Buck lay stretched on a soft pile of fresh blankets, his tail flicking weakly each time Ash, now stronger and more curious, batted at his golden fur with a tiny paw. Callista Winslow watched them through the open door, a smile tugging at her lips every time Buck lifted his head to nuzzle Ash protectively. Seraphine Calvert and Caspian Harlow stood just beyond the kennel, reviewing the final vet reports from the raid. Seraphine's eyes scanned the pages, her voice soft but steady. 53 animals, all alive, malnourished but treatable. No more hidden cages. No more lost cries in the dark. Caspian placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "And it started with him," he said, nodding at Buck, who now looked more like the gentle guardian he'd always been. Thorn Whitlock entered carrying a tray of donated food, followed by Magnus Ellery balancing a stack of folded blankets. "Community's stepping up," Thorn announced, his rough voice carrying pride he rarely showed. "Local families are already signing up to foster." Some of these animals will sleep in warm beds tonight for the first time in their lives. Magnus added, glancing at Buck and Ash. And it's because this old hero refused to let go. In the corner, Eloan Graves carefully filled out the adoption paperwork she'd been too afraid to sign before. She paused to watch Buck and Ash playing, the kitten batting playfully at Buck's ear, the dog rumbling a patient growl in return. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her smile stayed steady. He was never just a stray, she whispered to herself. He was family from the start. I see that now. Meanwhile, Lucian Brandt stepped inside with Orion Kessler, both dusted with hay and sweat from hours at the farmhouse. Lucian leaned on the doorframe, eyes on Buck. He's not just a dog. He's proof that loyalty is stronger than any lock or chain. Orion grinned, slapping Lucian's back. And proof that good people still exist, even when they come with fur and paws. As the shelter bustled with new volunteers, donated supplies, and gentle laughter instead of quiet despair, Buck lifted his head one last time, locking eyes with Seraphine. She approached the kennel, knelt beside him, and whispered, "Rest now, Buck. We've got them from here." Ash, full of kitten mischief, curled up under Buck's chin, purring so softly that even the nurses paused to listen. And for the first time in days, the walls of Willow Creek Shelter felt less like a cage, and more like the safe, beating heart Buck had always guarded for them all. A soft rain tapped gently against the shelter's windows as evening settled over Willow Creek. Inside, the halls buzzed not with fear or hushed worry, but with gentle chatter and the rustle of new beds being laid out for rescued paws. Buck, no longer trembling or hollow-eyed, lay in his favorite corner kennel, the door wide open. Ash, now a lively ball of gray fluff, tumbled over Buck's back, batting playfully at his golden ears. Seraphine Calvert stood with Lucian Brandt and Caspian Harlow just outside the kennel. They watched the pair in quiet awe. Lucian spoke first, voice low but filled with pride. "You realize what you've built here, Seraphine? This shelter isn't just walls anymore. It's hope, because one old dog reminded everyone what real loyalty looks like." Seraphine's lips curved into a tired, grateful smile. "He did more than guard a kitten. He taught us how to guard each other." Callista Winslow joined them, holding a clipboard now filled with approved foster homes for every rescued soul from the raid. Her eyes drifted to Buck, who perked up as she knelt to scratch behind his ears. "You're a hero, you stubborn boy," she murmured. Ash climbed onto her shoulder, purring so loudly that Caspian chuckled under his breath. "Seems he's claimed you too, Callista. Might want to check your adoption papers." Across the hall, Eloan Graves finalized her volunteer paperwork, her fingers steady this time. She caught Seraphine's eye and lifted the form with a soft grin. "No more running. No more secrets. If Buck can stand guard without fear, so can I." Thorne Whitlock, leaning against the supply cabinet, raised an eyebrow and teased, "About time someone besides Buck learned to be stubborn around here." Outside, the last transport van pulled away, carrying the final group of rescued animals to their new foster homes. Magnus Ellery and Orion Kessler watched the taillights fade into the rainy dusk, their boots muddy but spirits light. Magnus nudged Orion's shoulder. "Next time you complain about staying late for a rescue, remember Buck didn't sleep for days just to keep a heartbeat alive." Orion smirked. "Next time, I'll just ask Buck for backup." As night settled, Seraphine returned to Buck and Ash one last time. She sank to her knees, pressing her forehead gently to Buck's. Ash curled up between them, tiny purrs vibrating like a promise in the quiet. "Rest now, Buck," she whispered. "Your fight made this place a sanctuary. We'll carry that forward, for every forgotten soul that finds us." Buck's tail thumped once, Ash nestled closer, and Willow Creek Shelter, once just walls and cages, now breathed as a family bound by fur, trust, and the unbreakable love of a dog who refused to let go.